It was early morning when Lena stepped off the train with her small brown suitcase and a folded piece of paper that had a name and address written on it. The air was cold, the platform nearly empty, and she was shivering even though she wore her best coat. She had come from the Philippines after months of letters with a man who promised her a new life in America. His last letter said he would meet her in St. Louis, but now as she looked around the small sign that read Emporium Station, she began to feel something was wrong. She didn't know this place. It wasn't the city she had imagined. She sat on a wooden bench unsure of what to do. The train had already gone and she didn't have much money left. She didn't even know how to ask for help properly. Her English was broken and the faces around her looked busy and distant. Every time she tried to speak, the words felt stuck in her throat. Hours passed. People came and went and the platform grew quieter. The sun rose higher, but the air stayed cold. Lena opened her small envelope and looked again at the man's photo. He looked kind, with neat hair and a smile that seemed warm on paper. But he was far away now and she was stranded, lost in a place she didn't belong. Her heart felt heavy. As she sat there, a small voice broke the silence. "Papa?" the little girl whispered from behind a post. "That lady looks sad." Lena turned her head slowly. A child no older than 7 was peeking at her. The girl had curly brown hair and large blue eyes. Beside her stood a tall man in a thick coat carrying a lunch pail. His face looked tired but kind. The girl pointed shyly toward Lena and tugged at her father's sleeve. "Papa, that's her," she said softly. "God finally answered us." The man looked confused at first. He glanced at Lena, then at his daughter. "Maggie," he said gently, "we don't know that lady." But the child insisted. "She's the one, Papa, I just know." Lena didn't understand all their words, but she understood tone. The girl's voice was full of something she hadn't heard in a long time. Hope. The man walked closer, his steps careful. He could see that the young woman was lost, her eyes red from crying. He asked quietly, "Miss, are you waiting for someone?" Lena hesitated before speaking. Her voice trembled. I think—" "Wrong place." She held up the letter and pointed to the name. "St. Louis." "But train stop, wrong?" James Carter looked at the address and realized she had gotten off hundreds of miles early. "You're far from St. Louis," he said gently. "This is Emporium, Pennsylvania. You're a long way from where you need to be." When she heard that, Lena's face went pale. She lowered her eyes and clutched her suitcase tightly. "No money. No more ticket," she whispered. Her words were simple, but her meaning clear. James felt something stir inside him. Maybe it was pity, maybe something deeper. He couldn't imagine leaving someone alone in that condition. He turned to his daughter, who was already looking up at him with pleading eyes. "Papa, can she come home?" "Just for today?" Maggie asked. He sighed. His heart softened. "Ma'am," he said kindly, "my home's nearby. You can rest there tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to get you back on your way." Lena didn't know how to answer. She wanted to trust him but was afraid. Still, when she saw the little girl smiling at her with complete innocence, she nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. The walk to their house was short but quiet. Snowflakes started to fall, landing gently on Lena's hair. The small wooden house at the end of the dirt road looked worn but warm. Smoke rose from the chimney and a dog barked once before running up to greet them. Inside, the air smelled faintly of pine wood and old books. The house had few things. Just a table, a few chairs, and a fireplace glowing with orange light. Lena stood by the door, afraid to touch anything. James handed her a cup of warm tea. "Sit," he said with a kind smile. "You're safe here." Maggie sat next to Lena, her small feet swinging under the chair. "What's your name?" the little girl asked cheerfully. "Lena," she answered softly, pointing to herself. "That's pretty," Maggie said, grinning. "I'm Maggie, and that's Papa." Lena smiled for the first time since she got off the train. "Papa," she repeated, testing the word, and both of them chuckled. It was a small moment, but it broke the ice. That evening, Lena helped in the kitchen. She chopped vegetables slowly, watching how James cooked. She wasn't used to American food, but she tried her best. She found rice in a jar and smiled with relief. When the food was ready, Maggie clapped her hands and said grace before eating. As they ate, James asked her gentle questions. Where she came from, who she was supposed to meet, how she ended up here. Her answers were short but honest. She explained that she had agreed to marry a man who wrote her letters from America, She thought he would love her, or at least be kind. Her family back home had sold things just to pay for her ticket. She was supposed to start a new life, but now she was lost. When she finished speaking, the room was quiet except for the crackling of the fire. Maggie looked sad. "You can stay with us until you find him," she said, reaching out to hold Lena's hand. James smiled faintly. "She's right," he said softly. "No one should be alone in a strange place." After dinner, Lena helped wash the dishes. She hummed a soft song in her language, something her mother used to sing when times were hard. The melody was calm and beautiful. Maggie leaned on the doorway, listening like it was the sweetest thing she had ever heard. That night, Lena stayed in the spare room, a small one with a single bed and a wool blanket. She looked out the window and saw snow falling in slow circles under the moonlight. For the first time since arriving in America, she didn't feel completely alone. In the next room, Maggie whispered to her father, "Papa, I told you." God sent her. James tucked his daughter into bed and smiled. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but we'll see what tomorrow brings." Lena lay awake for a long time, thinking about everything: the missed station, the strange kindness of a man and his daughter, the way fate had twisted her path. Maybe, she thought, the wrong station wasn't really wrong at all. She closed her eyes, listening to the faint laughter of Maggie in the next room, and drifted into sleep with a heart that finally felt a little less heavy. The house was quiet except for the fire and the sound of snow outside. 3 lives, once far apart, now shared one roof by chance, or maybe by something more. And while no one could yet see it, that one mistake at the station would become the beginning of everything they never knew they were waiting for. Morning light came through the window, and Lena woke to the smell of fresh bread and the sound of a child's laughter. For a moment she forgot she was in a stranger's house. Then she heard Maggie's voice calling, "Papa, she's awake," and she remembered where she was. A small wooden house in Emporium, far from where she was supposed to be. She got up quietly, brushed her hair, and stepped into the kitchen. Maggie was sitting at the table, her cheeks red from the cold, and James was putting more wood in the stove. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. "I hope you slept well." Lena nodded. "Yes, thank you." He handed her a cup of coffee, and she held it carefully as if afraid to spill a gift. She had never known such simple kindness from strangers. Maggie chatted happily while eating bread with jam. She talked about school, her friends, and how she missed her mother. When she noticed Lena's quiet smile, she asked, "Do you have a family?" Lena looked down for a moment. "Yes, in my country. Mama, brothers, sisters. I come here for better life." Maggie nodded as if she understood everything. "Maybe God wanted you here instead," she said proudly. James laughed softly. "You and your big ideas, little one." But he glanced at Lena and saw the sadness behind her eyes. The snow outside had fallen thick overnight. The trains were not running for 2 days, the station clerk said when James checked. So Lena stayed. She helped clean, cooked simple meals, and told Maggie stories about warm beaches and bright sun back home. Maggie loved every word and began to follow her everywhere. On the 3rd day, Lena found an old sewing kit and repaired Maggie's coat. "Now warm," she said, tying the last thread. Maggie hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Miss Lena," she whispered. "Just Lena," she corrected softly, smiling. James watched from the doorway, feeling something inside him change. For 2 years since his wife's passing, the house had felt empty. He had learned to live with silence. But now every corner echoed with gentle laughter and the sound of life again. That evening they all sat near the fire. Maggie drew with her crayons 3 figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "That's us," she said proudly, showing her drawing. "Me, Papa, and Lena." James smiled but didn't speak. He didn't want to make her think Lena would stay. The young woman still had her own dreams, and he knew she needed to go where her life was waiting. A week passed before the train started running again. Lena wrote a letter to the man in St. Louis explaining what had happened and asking if he still wanted her to come. She walked to the post office and mailed it with trembling hands. Days turned into weeks before the reply came. The letter was short, cold, and without warmth. It said, "If you cannot follow instructions, maybe this arrangement is not for you." Lena read it over and over, her heart breaking quietly inside. She didn't cry. She simply folded the paper and placed it in her bag. When James saw her sitting alone on the porch that night, he asked, Did you hear back? She nodded and handed him the letter. He read it slowly, then set it down. I'm sorry, he said gently. You didn't deserve that. She looked at him, her eyes soft but steady. Maybe it not mistake, she whispered. Maybe I get off right place. He wanted to say something, that he had been thinking the same thing, but words failed him. Instead, he said, you have a home here for as long as you need it. From that day on, things began to feel natural, as if she had always been there. She taught Maggie little songs from her language, soft and full of feeling. They sang while cooking or walking to the store. The townspeople started asking who she was, and James would answer simply, a friend who's helping out. One Sunday morning, Lena dressed Maggie in her fixed coat, and they went to church together. People stared a little at first. It wasn't often a woman from far away came to their small town. But Lena greeted everyone with a shy smile, and by the end of the service, even the oldest ladies were smiling back. After church, they had lunch together, and Maggie said suddenly, Papa, can she stay forever? James froze. Lena looked down at her hands, not sure what to say. Maggie, he said softly, Lena has her own plans. Maybe one day she'll go see her family again. But she can still come back, right? The little girl asked, hope in her eyes. Lena reached over and gently brushed a curl from Maggie's forehead. Yes, she said. I can come back. Time moved quietly after that. Winter turned to spring. Flowers began to bloom outside the house. Lena planted small seeds by the porch and smiled when the first sprouts appeared. She said it made her feel like life could begin again from nothing. One afternoon, as James came home from work, he saw Lena and Maggie sitting on the steps laughing together as they fed crumbs to birds. He stopped for a moment watching them. It was a picture he never wanted to forget. Sunlight in their hair, peace on their faces. That night, after Maggie had gone to bed, James sat across from Lena at the kitchen table. The light flickered softly. I've been thinking, he said slowly. You've done so much for us. For Maggie. I can't thank you enough. She shook her head. No, you helped me first. You give me home, food, kindness. He looked at her for a long time. Maybe, he said quietly. We both helped each other. Silence hung between them for a few seconds, warm and full of understanding. He didn't reach out. He didn't need to. The feeling was clear in both their hearts. That spring, Lena decided not to leave. There was no letter to write, no promise to chase. She started working part-time at the small diner in town. People liked her smile and the way she remembered everyone's order. Maggie visited after school, sitting on the counter while Lena served coffee. The little girl often introduced her proudly to anyone who asked. This is Lena, she would say. God sent her to us. Years later, when Maggie grew older, she still told the story to her own children. She would point to a family picture on the wall, her father smiling beside a gentle woman with dark hair, and say, That's my mama. She got off at the wrong station, but that's how God made her ours. And every time Lena heard Maggie say those words, she smiled softly and whispered to herself, maybe the wrong train stop was the right one after all. Life didn't give her what she expected, but it gave her what she truly needed, a family, a place, and a reason to stay. And for James and Maggie, the woman who stepped off the wrong train became the answer they had been praying for all along.